Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about something that might seem counterintuitive at first, the power of vulnerability. Now, I know the word vulnerability might make you think of weakness or being exposed, but let me tell you, it's quite the opposite. Vulnerability is where real strength lies. It's the foundation of authentic relationships, personal growth, and true success. You see, vulnerability is like the foundation of a bridge. At first glance, it seems fragile, but without it, the structure collapses. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open the door to connection, courage, and transformation. So let's explore 6 key points about the power of vulnerability and how it can revolutionize your life. Imagine this: you're at a gathering surrounded by people you barely know. The room is filled with polite conversations, surface-level pleasantries, and smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. You nod, you laugh at the right moments, but something feels hollow. You're wearing your mask, the one that says, "I've got it all together, everyone else seems to be wearing theirs too." Now picture a moment when someone breaks the mold. A person steps forward sharing a story about a mistake they made, a loss they experienced, or a fear they've been battling. Their voice trembles slightly, their vulnerability is palpable, and for a moment there's silence. But in that silence, something shifts. Eyes soften, heads nod, people lean in, not away. That one act of vulnerability creates an invisible bridge, connecting hearts across the room. Suddenly walls come down and others begin to share their own stories, not perfect stories, but real ones. Laughter becomes richer, conversations deeper, and smiles genuine. Think about a time in your own life when someone opened up to you, perhaps a friend confessing they felt overwhelmed, a family member admitting they didn't have all the answers, or a colleague sharing how much they struggled to get where they are. How did it make you feel? Likely it drew you closer to them. You didn't see their vulnerability as weakness, you saw it as courage. Their honesty gave you permission to be honest too. The magic of vulnerability is that it reminds us we're not alone in our imperfections. It cuts through the superficial and taps into our shared humanity. Connection happens when someone says, "Here I am, flaws and all," and we respond, "I see you and I accept you." Vulnerability builds connection because it's real. It strips away the pretense and replaces it with authenticity. In a world where so much feels curated and rehearsed, vulnerability is like a breath of fresh air. It's the unspoken language that says, "I trust you enough to let you see the real me," and in that trust, connection flourishes. Picture this: a child standing at the edge of a diving board high above the water. Their knees are trembling, their heart pounding, and their breath comes in shallow bursts. Below, the pool seems endless, an expanse of the unknown. They glance back at their parent or coach who offers a nod of encouragement, but the decision is theirs alone. The child is scared, but in that moment they take a deep breath, step forward, and leap. Now think about the courage it took to jump, not because the fear vanished, but because they chose to act despite it. That leap is a perfect metaphor for vulnerability. Courage isn't about being fearless, it's about acknowledging fear and moving forward anyway. And that's what makes vulnerability so powerful. It's the birthplace of true bravery. Imagine standing in front of a room full of people, your palms sweating as you prepare to share a deeply personal story. It's the kind of story that reveals parts of you you've hidden away, the parts you're afraid others might judge. Your inner critic screams at you to stay silent, to protect yourself from exposure. But you take a breath, push through the discomfort, and begin to speak. As the words flow, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter, freer, and the audience leans in, captivated. You notice nods of understanding, the glint of tears in someone's eyes, and by the time you finish, there's a thunderous applause. What you thought would be your most vulnerable moment became your most courageous one. Think about a relationship you've cherished, a time when you confessed your feelings, admitted you were wrong, or asked for forgiveness. Those moments are terrifying because they require you to expose your heart with no guarantee of how it will be received. But the act of being vulnerable, saying, I love you, I need help, or I'm sorry, is one of the boldest things you can do. Is stepping into the unknown with the hope that it will be worth it. Every great achievement, every meaningful relationship, every bold decision requires vulnerability. It's the courage to start a business not knowing if it will succeed, to audition for a role knowing you might face rejection, or to share your art with the world unsure if it will be appreciated. Vulnerability doesn't eliminate fear, it carries it with grace, knowing that courage is born in those shaky, uncertain moments. The power of vulnerability lies in its ability to transform fear into action, hesitation into boldness, and doubt into determination. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you unlock the courage that moves mountains and changes lives. Imagine a seed buried in the soil. It's surrounded by darkness, enclosed in a shell that's tight and unyielding. To grow, the seed must do something that seems almost impossible. It must break open. It must crack its own protective casing, stretch toward the unknown, and push through the heavy, dense earth above it. That process is neither easy nor comfortable, but it's necessary. Without that initial vulnerability, the seed would never sprout, never bloom, and never reach its potential. Now picture yourself as that seed. Life has a way of burying us in challenges, uncertainties, and even pain. Growth demands that we embrace the discomfort of breaking open, that we confront the fear of stepping into the unfamiliar. Vulnerability is the moment when we admit, I don't have all the answers, or I need to change, and that honesty is the first step toward transformation. Think about a time when you faced a failure. Maybe it was a career setback, a relationship that ended, or a personal goal you didn't reach. In that moment, it felt like you were buried under the weight of disappointment. But if you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, to reflect, to seek guidance, or to admit where things went wrong, you started to see the lessons hidden in the struggle. You discovered strengths you didn't know you had, or perhaps you developed resilience that carried you forward. Consider an artist standing in front of a blank canvas. They've never tried this style before, and the fear of making a mistake looms large. But they pick up the brush anyway, knowing that vulnerability is part of the creative process. With each stroke, they learn something new about the medium, about their skill, about themselves. Growth comes not from avoiding failure, but from risking it, embracing it, and learning through it. Think of the first time you tried something new, a sport, a language, a public performance. The initial attempts were awkward, maybe even embarrassing, but you kept going. Vulnerability made you open to feedback, willing to practice, and unafraid to try again. Each stumble taught you something. Each mistake became a stepping stone. Over time, you grew not only in ability, but also in confidence. Or imagine a leader who admits to their team, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to learn alongside you. That act of vulnerability doesn't undermine their authority, it strengthens it. It creates an environment where growth is celebrated, not feared. Not feared. Their willingness to be vulnerable sets an example, showing that growth comes from a place of humility and openness. Every time you allow yourself to be vulnerable, whether by seeking feedback, admitting a shortcoming, or stepping into the unknown, you create the conditions for growth. It's uncomfortable, yes. It requires courage, absolutely. But vulnerability is what allows you to stretch beyond your current limits, to break through the barriers that hold you back, and to discover the incredible potential within. Picture a leader standing before their team after a major setback. The project they had worked on for months has failed. The numbers are in, and they're not what anyone hoped for. The room is silent, filled with the weight of disappointment. All eyes are on the leader, waiting for their response. Instead of deflecting blame, instead of masking their feelings with a polished facade, the leader takes a deep breath and speaks from the heart. I know this didn't go the way we planned, they say. And I take responsibility for the choices I made. This is hard for me, just as I know it's hard for all of you. But I believe in us, and I believe we can learn from this. In that moment, something extraordinary happens. The team doesn't lose respect for the leader, they gain it. They see someone who is willing to own their mistakes, who values accountability over ego, and who isn't afraid to show that they too are human. That vulnerability fosters trust, the kind of trust that builds unshakable loyalty. Now, imagine a leader in a brainstorming session. Instead of dominating the conversation or insisting on their ideas, they admit, I don't have all the answers here. I want to hear what you think. Their openness creates a safe space where team members feel encouraged to share their ideas, no matter how unconventional. That vulnerability turns the leader from a figure of authority into a catalyst for creativity and collaboration. Think of a time when a leader faced a crisis, a product recall, a public relations challenge, or a sudden market shift. The temptation to project unwavering confidence can be overwhelming. But the most inspiring leaders are those who admit, this is tough and I don't have it all figured out yet, but I'm committed to navigating this with you step by step. Their vulnerability doesn't undermine their leadership, it amplifies it. It shows that they are willing to navigate uncertainty alongside their team, not above it. Picture a young manager stepping into their first leadership role. They feel the pressure to prove themselves, to appear infallible in the eyes of their team, but instead of pretending they have it all together, they choose a different path. I'm new at this, they say, and I'll need your help along the way. Let's learn together that simple act of vulnerability creates a foundation of mutual respect and shared growth. Or imagine a seasoned executive mentoring an up-and-coming leader. Instead of only sharing their victories, they talk about the mistakes they made along the way, the deals that fell through, the opportunities they mishandled. In doing so, they give their mentee something priceless, the understanding that failure is not the end, but a stepping stone. Their vulnerability transforms them from an untouchable figure into an approachable guide. Vulnerability strengthens leadership because it breaks down barriers and replaces them with bridges. It shifts the dynamic from me versus them to us together. It demonstrates that real leadership isn't about pretending to be invincible. It's about showing that you care enough to be real. Picture this, you're sitting across from someone you deeply admire, a mentor, a potential partner, or perhaps even someone you love. Your heart pounds as you contemplate whether to share your dream, your struggle, or your feelings. Doubt creeps in, whispering that you might be judged or rejected. But something inside you pushes forward, and with a trembling voice, you let your guard down. As the words leave your lips, a shift happens. The other person's expression softens, their eyes meeting yours with understanding. They lean in, not away. What you feared would drive them away instead draws them closer. Your willingness to be vulnerable opens a door you didn't even know was there, a door to deeper connection, to shared dreams, to possibilities you hadn't dared to imagine. Now think about the entrepreneur standing on a stage, pitching their idea to investors. Their concept isn't perfect. There are risks and challenges they can't fully solve yet. But instead of pretending to have all the answers, they admit, here's where I need your expertise. Here's why I believe in this. Even though it's uncharted territory, that honesty, that vulnerability doesn't weaken their pitch, it strengthens it. It shows their authenticity and passion, creating an opportunity for others to believe in their vision and invest in it. Imagine an artist unveiling their work for the first time, a painting, a song, a novel. Their creation holds pieces of their soul, and sharing it feels like standing naked in front of the world. But by stepping into that vulnerable space, they invite others into their story. And in doing so, they create opportunities not only for recognition, but for their work to resonate, to inspire, and to connect with something deep in others. Think about someone taking the risk to apologize after a rift in a relationship. They approach the person they've hurt, not knowing how their vulnerability will be received. They say, I was wrong and I'm truly sorry. It's terrifying because it strips away all defenses. But in that moment, they create the possibility for reconciliation, for healing, for rebuilding trust. vulnerability becomes the bridge to something better. Or imagine someone stepping into a new role they feel unprepared for, a leadership position, a new job, or a personal challenge. They openly admit, "I'm learning as I go and I know I'll make mistakes." By owning their vulnerability, they don't diminish their authority. They create opportunities for mentorship, for collaboration, and for others to step up and support them. Vulnerability creates opportunity because it signals that you're willing to risk rejection, failure, or discomfort in the pursuit of something meaningful. It opens doors that might otherwise remain locked, doors to connection, to growth, to success. It's the spark that ignites change, the leap that turns dreams into reality. Every time you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you create space for the unexpected, the transformative, and the extraordinary. And so, my friends, let us embrace the truth that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a superpower. It's the force that connects us, fuels our courage, drives our growth, strengthens our leadership, and creates opportunities we never thought possible. When you choose to be vulnerable, you open yourself to the richness of life, to deeper relationships, to greater successes, and to the profound fulfillment that comes from living authentically. It's not always easy and it will challenge you, but it's through those moments of discomfort that you'll find your greatest strength. So go forth and dare to be seen, dare to take risks, and dare to lead with your heart. Because when you lead with vulnerability, you don't just open doors, you change lives, starting with your own. Thank you.